The midday sun scorched the plains, painting the endless horizon in swirls of gold and dusty orange. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the scent of dry earth and sagebrush. At the edge of Dry Creek, a small trickle of water barely cut through the cracked riverbed. Yet it was all that separated life from ruin. A lone figure staggered along the creek's edge, her long skirt dust-streaked, hat crushed by the sun. Her dark hair clung to her sweat-streaked face, and her eyes, green as spring leaves, scanned the barren landscape with a desperation that turned every shadow into a threat. Her name was Vivienne Hart, a woman of 30, known across Silver Pass as a woman of beauty and grit. But even beauty could not shield her from the merciless heat and the lawless land. She collapsed onto the hard sand, hands clawing at the earth for some anchor, some stability. Her lips were cracked, her throat raw, and the water in her canteen had long since disappeared. She whispered to herself a trembling prayer. Please, not like this. From the distant ridge, a movement caught her eye. At first, she thought it a trick of the heat, something wavering, flickering, but then the figure grew distinct. A tall man emerged from the haze, his skin bronzed by the sun, dark hair falling past his shoulders, and his presence commanding yet calm. Across his bare chest glimmered the sun on a string of bone and turquoise beads. He carried a small leather pouch slung over one shoulder and walked with a quiet, deliberate grace. Vivienne squinted, unsure whether to fear or hope. She had heard tales of the Apache warriors wandering the borderlands, fierce and untamed. Yet something about this man's aura, strong, watchful, almost sorrowful, stirred something in her that she had long buried. Hope. The man stopped a few feet away, crouched, and placed the pouch on the sand between them. From it, he drew a small clay jar filled with water. Drink, he said, his voice low but unwavering, like the wind through canyons. His words were simple, yet they carried weight, as though every syllable was tied to centuries of survival and honor. Vivienne's throat tightened. Pride battled desperation, but the dryness in her mouth won. She reached for the jar, hands shaking, and sipped carefully. The water was cool, almost sweet, and it brought her fading strength back in waves. She blinked up at him. Why help me?" she croaked, voice barely more than a whisper. The Apache warrior's dark eyes studied her, not with judgment, but with curiosity and caution. "Because," he said finally, "some lives are meant to be saved, even when the world forgets how." For a moment, the two remained silent. Only the whisper of the wind and the faint trickle of the creek broke the tension. Vivienne felt her heart pounding not from the heat, but from something deeper, unspoken, stirring in the air between them. She had wandered through towns that whispered about her fortune and misfortune, about the scandals of Silver Pass, and now she stood before a man who seemed untouched by society's eyes. A man who belonged to the land itself. Then the sound came. A distant shout, ragged and urgent, carried across the plains. Vivienne froze. Her heart sank as she realized someone was pursuing her, not lawmen, but mercenaries from a rival ranch, men who would not hesitate to harm her for reasons long buried in family feuds and greed. The Apache warrior stiffened, placing a protective hand on the small pouch. His eyes narrowed like a hawk spotting movement far below. "Who are they?" Vivienne whispered, panic rising in her voice. "They are men blinded by anger, not reason," he replied. "They will not see you as a woman, but as a prize or a pawn." "You must move?" Vivienne rose slowly, swaying as her strength returned. She could barely keep her legs steady, but she trusted him instinctively. Somehow, she knew that he would not let her fall, not now, not here. "Follow me," he said, turning toward the shadowed ridge where the land dipped into a hidden canyon. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and dust, mingling with the tension between them. Vivienne followed, unsure whether fear or fascination drove her steps, but knowing she had no choice. And as they disappeared into the shadows of Dry Creek, the sun glinting off his tribal beads, something shifted in the air, a whisper, almost a promise. The land itself seemed to watch them, curious, silent, as if it too knew that the story was only just beginning, because no one in Silver Pass would have expected what came next. Not even Vivienne. And certainly not anyone who witnessed the Apache give water to the woman who had wandered into the desert alone. The narrow canyon swallowed the sun, casting long shadows over the jagged rocks. Vivienne Hart followed the Apache warrior, his name she still did not know, her bare hands, brushing against the rough stone walls as she stumbled along the uneven path. Every step was a battle against exhaustion, but the presence of the warrior beside her gave her a strange, almost impossible comfort. His bare chest gleamed with sweat, muscles flexing under the midday light as he moved with predatory grace, alert to every sound, every movement in the distance. "Are they close?" Vivienne asked, her voice hoarse from thirst and fear. "They will be," he said, his eyes scanning the ridge above. "But the land favors those who know it. Stay close and do not make a sound." Vivienne swallowed, nodding. She kept her gaze forward, trying to ignore the pounding of her heart and the ragged breath that came in uneven gasps. She had never ventured this far into the wilds of Silver Pass. Every town, every ranch, every lawless corner of the plains she had ever known now seemed like a distant memory. Here, with the canyon walls towering above, the world felt raw, untamed, and alive in a way she had never experienced. Suddenly, the sound of snapping twigs echoed down the narrow corridor. Vivienne froze, but the Apache warrior was already crouched, eyes narrowing, muscles coiled like a panther ready to strike. He raised a finger, signaling her to stay silent. She pressed herself against the canyon wall, the dust scraping against her arms. Hard hammering as two figures appeared on the ridge above. Men. Armed, roughened by sun and wind, faces streaked with sweat and dirt, rifles slung over their shoulders. Vivienne recognized the threatening glint in their eyes immediately. These were not lawmen. They were the men who had hunted her from Silver Pass, mercenaries loyal to a man whose greed and fury had no bounds. The Apache warrior's lips pressed into a thin line. Slowly, he reached into a leather satchel and pulled out a small pouch of dust, letting it fall to the ground and scatter in the wind. Vivienne watched confused until he whispered, "Cactus ash. It blinds them for a moment. When I give the signal, run." Her pulse quickened, terror battling with an instinctive trust in him. She had seen enough of the world to know that trust was dangerous. Yet something in the way he moved, deliberate and calm, radiated an unshakable certainty. The men advanced, their boots crunching against the dry earth. The warrior's gaze never left them. When they reached the narrowest part of the canyon, he threw the ash toward their faces. A cloud erupted, choking and stinging, and the mercenaries shouted, waving their arms blindly. "Now!" he hissed. Vivienne ran, stumbling over jagged rocks, the Dry Creek bed looming below. She felt him behind her, his hand brushing against hers for balance as they leapt across a small crevice. Her breath came in sharp bursts, lungs burning, but the fear in her chest was tempered by an awe she could not name. Finally, they reached a shaded alcove, hidden from the sun, where the air was cooler and the wind carried the faint scent of juniper. Vivienne sank to the ground, gasping, her skirt covered in dust, hair plastered to her face. The Apache warrior crouched nearby, scanning the canyon entrance, muscles tensed as though ready for another attack. "You saved me," Vivienne said, her voice trembling. "Why? I am nothing to you. A stranger in the desert." He looked at her then, eyes dark and unreadable. Sometimes strangers carry the weight of something greater than themselves, he said. I have seen the greed of men destroy more than land or livestock. I will not let it destroy you. Vivienne felt a shiver run through her. His words, though simple, carried a truth she could not ignore. There was a depth to him, pain, history, unspoken losses that called to something buried deep within her own heart. She had survived storms, betrayals, and loneliness. Yet standing here, next to this warrior, she felt a connection she could neither name nor resist. The canyon remained quiet for a few long minutes. Then, without warning, a low whistle cut through the air, a warning. The mercenaries had regrouped and were attempting to flank them from the opposite ridge. The Apache warrior's hand rested on a small bow he had drawn from a leather quiver. "Vivienne," he said, his voice calm but urgent, "we must move again. Trust the path I take. Do not look back. Just follow me." As they sprinted down the hidden trail, Vivienne caught sight of the desert stretching endlessly beyond the canyon walls, golden and unforgiving. And yet, beside her, the warrior ran with a strength and purpose that seemed almost otherworldly. Every step they took, every heartbeat, carried the weight of an unspoken promise, survival, justice, and a story that no one in Silver Pass would ever forget, because soon, what happened next, what no one could have predicted, would shock the entire town and change both their lives forever. The hidden trail twisted deeper into the canyon, shadows stretching like dark fingers across the rocky path. Vivienne Hart struggled to keep pace with the Apache warrior. Each step she took was heavy, weighted with fear and anticipation. Her lungs burned from exertion, and her skin prickled with the heat of the sun above, yet she kept moving, driven by trust and by the inexplicable pull she felt toward him. The mercenaries' voices were distant now, carried faintly on the wind, but Vivienne could still hear the occasional shout or clatter of boots against rock. The Apache warrior's eyes never wavered. His head moved with acute awareness, scanning every ridge, every shadow. Every muscle in his body seemed attuned to danger, yet his movements were smooth, almost predatory, like a cat weaving through the underbrush. After what felt like an eternity, the canyon opened into a small plateau, hidden from view of the ridges above. A faint spring bubbled at its center, clear water pooling among jagged stones. Vivienne sank to her knees, cupping her hands to drink, the cold water shocking her senses awake. She closed her eyes, the first taste of relief in hours. Maybe days. The Apache warrior knelt beside her, silently watching, muscles coiled in case the danger returned. He allowed her a moment, but the expression on his face was tense, unreadable, filled with a knowledge she did not yet understand. Vivienne looked up at him, gratitude mingled with curiosity. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice fragile in the quiet of the plateau. "I am called Taza," he said, his voice low, resonant, almost like a chant carried by the wind. "And you are safe, for now." Vivienne swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "Why me? Why help me?" Taza's gaze darkened, almost shadowed with memories she could not see. The land chooses whom it will protect. Sometimes it chooses unexpectedly. She wanted to press for answers, but before she could, a rustling sound interrupted the moment. Taza's eyes snapped toward the edge of the plateau, muscles tensing again. Vivienne's stomach lurched. Something or someone was approaching from behind a cluster of boulders. A figure emerged. A man, ragged, dressed in tattered clothing, his eyes wide with desperation. At first, Vivienne thought he might be another mercenary, but his hands were empty, trembling. He collapsed to the ground before her, gasping for breath, eyes wild. Vivienne staggered back, startled. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man's lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound came. He clutched a small leather satchel to his chest, shaking violently. Finally, he managed a hoarse whisper. They have it. They're coming. Taza stepped forward, placing a protective hand between Vivienne and the man. His eyes, sharp and commanding, scanned the horizon. Calm yourself, he said. Then, to Vivienne, he added, we must know what he carries. It may explain why you are being hunted. The man fumbled with the satchel and pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Vivienne's breath caught as Taza unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a small, intricately carved wooden box. Symbols etched into the wood seemed to glow faintly in the sunlight. Vivienne reached out, unable to resist, and traced a finger along the carving's dot. Then, the box snapped open unexpectedly. Inside was a folded parchment, yellowed with age. Sealed with a symbol Vivienne recognized only from distant tales of Silver Pass, the emblem of a hidden fortune. Long rumored to exist, connected to families whose rivalries had torn the region apart. Vivienne's heart raced. This is why they were after me, she whispered. It's not just greed. It's everything my family has tried to hide. Taza's expression remained calm, but his eyes glimmered with a rare intensity. It explains much, he said. And it explains why your path has crossed mine. But now, knowing this, you are in greater danger than ever. The desert wind swept across the plateau, rustling Vivienne's hair and carrying with it a sense of inevitability. The mercenaries would not give up, and the land around Silver Pass held secrets older than any law or town. But standing beside Taza, she realized that fear was tempered by strength and perhaps by destiny. And in that moment, as the sun dipped low behind the canyon walls, Vivienne understood that the events set in motion by Taza's simple act, giving her water when she had almost collapsed, would shake the foundations of Silver Pass forever. She turned to him, eyes wide with unspoken questions. Taza met her gaze, unwavering, a silent promise of protection and guidance. And in the quiet of the plateau, with danger looming yet temporarily at bay, Vivienne realized that nothing would ever be the same, because soon, what they had discovered, the box, the parchment, the secret that could ignite an entire region, would make every eye in Silver Pass turn. And everyone would be shocked at the consequences of a single act of mercy. The fading sunlight cast long shadows across the plateau as Vivienne Hart and Taza crouched behind a cluster of jagged boulders, the small carved wooden box between them. The desert wind whispered through the canyon, carrying a faint scent of sage and dust. Vivienne's hands trembled slightly as she touched the box again, the intricate carvings burning faintly under her fingertips. They'll come, Taza said, his voice low, steady. His muscles tensed as he scanned the distant ridges, shadowed shapes forming against the dying light. Men who are after the box will not give up. They will follow every trail, every whisper of your presence. Vivienne swallowed, fear and fascination twisting in her chest. I never thought it could be real, she whispered. All my life I heard whispers about hidden fortunes, family secrets. And now it's in my hands. Taza's gaze hardened. Sometimes the truth is more dangerous than lies. He knelt beside her, brushing a lock of her sweat-damp hair from her face. And sometimes mercy carries consequences far greater than we imagine. The canyon walls suddenly echoed with a harsh, guttural shout. Vivienne's heart leapt into her throat. Shadows moved across the ridges, flickering in the last rays of sunmen. Heavily armed, advancing with rifles and ropes. Their intentions clear, Taza rose slowly, muscles rippling under the sun as he flexed and drew a small bow. The string hummed under his practiced fingers, the arrow aimed with precision at a distant figure. Stay low, he instructed, eyes never leaving the approaching threat. I will hold them at the ridge. You must move the box. Vivienne nodded, her pulse racing. She wrapped the wooden box carefully in her scarf, holding it close to her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, but the trail ahead was unfamiliar, jagged, and treacherous. She trusted Taza's judgment. Implicitly, he had saved her once already, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Suddenly, a rifle cracked. Dust exploded from the ground nearby, and Vivienne instinctively dropped behind a boulder. Taza had fired his arrow, knocking the rifle from a mercenary's hands before he could take aim again. The desert seemed to hold its breath, the tension thick as heat haze. Wind and dust swirled together. "Run!" Taza shouted. Vivienne rose, careful to keep the box protected, and sprinted down a narrow, hidden path that twisted between the canyon walls. Her legs burned, lungs screaming for relief, but the adrenaline kept her moving. Behind her, she heard the sharp twang of Taza's bow again and again. Arrows finding their mark, delaying the pursuers. The canyon opened to a shallow creek bed, where the fading water reflected the dimming sky. Vivienne stumbled, nearly falling, and the box slipped from her hands. She caught it just in time, heart racing as Taza appeared beside her in a blur, his presence like a shadow wrapped in muscle and calm strength. "They're close," he warned, scanning the ridges once more. His long black hair flowed in the wind, beads and feathers catching the last light of day. "We must reach the old homestead. It's abandoned, but it will provide cover." Vivienne followed him, barely believing her luck. Every instinct screamed danger, yet every step beside Taza felt like a promise of survival. She had never trusted anyone so completely, and the sensation both frightened and exhilarated her. As they approached the homestead, a low whistle carried across the canyon. Vivienne froze, recognizing it immediately, a signal from the mercenaries. They had flanked them. Her stomach dropped. She realized that no matter how careful they were, the box, the treasure, and now her very life had made her a target. Taza's eyes narrowed, calculating their next move. He stepped in front of her, bare chest gleaming, muscles taut, bow in hand, ready to defend. "They will not take you," he said, voice low and resolute. "Not while I draw breath." Vivienne's breath caught, not just from fear, but from the awe of the man before her. He was more than a warrior, he was a force of nature, untamed and fierce, yet entirely dedicated to protecting her. She clutched the box tightly, the carvings pressing against her chest, and realized that this moment, this tension, this pearl would change her forever. Suddenly, a shadow broke from the ridge, moving faster than the rest. Vivienne's heart stopped, and in that instant, she understood that the next moments would reveal secrets far beyond her, imagination secrets that would shock Silver Pass and everyone who thought they knew her story, because what happened next would not only test her courage, but challenge everything she believed about mercy, trust, and destiny in the unforgiving lands of the Old West. Night had fallen over the canyon, a deep indigo stretching across the sky, pierced by a scattering of stars. Vivienne Hart crouched behind the remains of the old homestead, the carved wooden box pressed tightly against her chest. The wind whispered through the broken roof and shattered windows, carrying a chill that made her shiver. But Taza's presence beside her was a shield against more than just the cold. "They're still out there," Taza murmured, muscles taut, bow in hand. His long black hair framed a face carved from determination and focus, tribal beads and feathers catching the faint moonlight. "We must move carefully. One mistake, and they will find us." Vivienne nodded, though her mind was racing. Hours ago, she had been wandering the desert, exhausted and desperate, and now she was the keeper of a secret, so powerful it could ignite the simmering rivalries of Silver Pass. She traced her fingers along the carvings of the box, a shiver running down her spine. Somehow, The simple act of receiving water from Taza had thrust her into a storm she could never have predicted. Suddenly, a faint creak echoed across the floorboards. Vivienne froze. Taza's eyes flicked to the sound, and he gestured for her to stay silent. From the shadows emerged a figure, hands raised in surrender, but eyes wide with terror. "Who's there?" Vivienne whispered, heart pounding. The figure stumbled forward, dropping to the floor. I'm Thomas," he stammered, voice trembling. "I was sent to find the box, but I couldn't." Taza stepped forward, bow lowered but eyes sharp. "Speak clearly." "What do you know?" Thomas swallowed hard. "The box. It contains the map to the Hart Estate's hidden vault. The one the families have fought over for generations. Whoever controls it controls everything. Land, cattle, silver, power in Silver Pass." Vivienne's breath caught. The whispers, the mercenaries, the pursuit, it all made sense now. Her family's past, the rumors of betrayal, the threats, they were all connected to this very box. "You have seen too much," Taza said, voice calm but firm. "Why should we trust you?" Thomas's eyes pleaded. "Because I don't want them to get it. Not the mercenaries, not the men who would kill for it. I want to stop the feud before it destroys everyone." Vivienne exchanged a glance with Taza, sensing the tension in his muscles. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Very well. But one false move—" His voice trailed off, leaving the threat unspoken, yet heavier than any words could be. Together, the three moved cautiously through the moonlit ruins, following a narrow path that led deeper into the canyon. The wind carried distant shouts. The mercenaries had not given up. Vivienne's heart raced with every step, but the weight of the box in her arms reminded her that they were holding more than wooden carvings. They were holding the key to untold secrets, power, and the chance to end a decades-long feud. Finally, they reached a concealed cave, hidden behind a wall of jagged rocks and overgrown shrubs. Taza knelt and carefully traced a pattern in the sand. The wall shifted slightly, revealing a dark entrance, barely visible under the moonlight. "This will keep us safe, for now," he said. "We can examine the box without fear of interruption." Vivienne hesitated at the entrance, heart hammering in her chest. But with Taza by her side, muscles coiled and eyes scanning for danger, she felt a surge of courage. Inside, the cave was cool and silent, lit only by the soft glow of a small oil lamp Taza produced from his satchel. She opened the box fully, unfolding the parchment inside. Her eyes widened at the detailed map, marking not only the Hart Estate's hidden vault but also secret trails, safe houses, and coded symbols that only someone familiar with the family's history could understand. Every line, every mark carried centuries of secrets, betrayals, and long-hidden treasures. This explains everything," Vivienne whispered. "Why they pursued me, why they wanted the box, why you helped me." Taza's gaze softened slightly as he looked at her. Mercy often carries consequences, but sometimes it reveals destiny. "You were meant to find this, Vivienne. And now, knowing its secrets, you can decide how the story ends." Before she could respond, a sudden noise echoed from the cave entrance. Dust shifted as shadows stretched across the floor. The mercenaries had tracked them, following the faint scent of desperation and pursuit. Vivienne's heart raced, but Taza's presence was unwavering, a living shield against the chaos that was about to erupt. And in that moment, she realized that the act that had changed everything, the simple act of receiving water from a stranger, had set in motion a chain of events so powerful, so shocking, that Silver Pass itself would never be the same. Because soon, everyone would see what mercy, courage, and destiny could create, and the revelation of the box would shake the very foundations of the town. leaving all who had doubted her utterly stunned. The wind howled through the canyon outside the cave, rattling loose stones and carrying distant shouts from the pursuing mercenaries. Vivienne Hart's hands clutched the carved wooden box so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her pulse pounded, matching the distant thuds of boots and the rasping calls of men determined to claim what she now possessed. Taza knelt beside her, muscular arms taut, bow at the ready. His long black hair fell over his shoulders, tribal beads catching the faint flicker of the oil lamp. His dark eyes scanned every shadow, every crack in the cave walls, alert to the slightest movement. To Vivienne, he looked almost supernatural, a force born of the land itself, untamed, fierce, yet unwaveringly protective. "They're coming," Taza murmured, his voice steady, controlled. "We don't have much time. You must remember, the box is more than wood and symbols. It holds the truth of Silver Pass and the key to stopping the greed that has plagued it for decades." Vivienne swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand," she said, voice trembling but determined. "I won't let them take it. Not after everything. Not after you saved me." Taza's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "Then stay behind me. And trust me." The cave entrance shuddered as the first of the mercenaries appeared, rifles raised. Taza released an arrow with precision, striking one in the shoulder, sending him crashing into the dust. Another leapt forward, only to be met with Taza's sweeping strike of the bow's wooden edge, sending him sprawling. Vivienne's heart raced as she realized the warrior was not merely strong. He was unstoppable, a storm of skill and raw power. Suddenly, a figure emerged carrying a lantern, illuminating the cave with a harsh orange glow. Vivienne's breath caught. This was the leader, the man who had orchestrated the pursuit, his eyes wild with fury. "Give me the box, Hart," he shouted. "You don't know what you're meddling with." Vivienne instinctively stepped back, clutching the box to her chest. "I will not," she declared, surprising even herself with the strength in her voice. Taza's gaze hardened. "You will not touch her. Not while I draw breath." He moved like a panther, weaving between shadows, each motion fluid, controlled, lethal. The mercenary leader hesitated, realizing too late that he underestimated the Apache warrior. The fight erupted with the intensity of a desert storm. Dust and grit swirled as Taza's arrows flew, each one finding its mark with uncanny precision. He dodged rifles and knives, moving like water over rocks, muscles flexing and taut under the flickering light. Vivienne barely dared to breathe, hiding behind a jagged stone, heart pounding as the violence unfolded before her. Then, with a calculated leap, Taza disarmed the leader, sending the rifle skidding across the cave floor. He pressed a hand against the man's chest, pinning him firmly. "Enough," Taza said, his voice low and commanding. "Silver Pass does not belong to the greedy. You will leave and never return." The leader's eyes widened, fury giving way to fear. Around the cave, the remaining mercenaries had fallen or fled, leaving the warrior and the woman alone in the shadows, victorious but weary. Vivienne's hands trembled as she stepped forward, touching Taza's arm. You saved me," she whispered, awe and gratitude intertwining with something she did not fully understand. Taza's expression softened, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Sometimes mercy demands strength," he said quietly. "And sometimes destiny chooses a path you cannot see until you are on it." Vivienne looked down at the box, the glowing symbols now faint, as if acknowledging the victory. She realized the weight of what she held, not just treasure, but the power to end a feud that had lasted generations. The shock of what had just happened, the fight, Taza's prowess, and the near impossible escape settled in her chest like a burning ember. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe, truly breathe. The desert wind swept through the cave, carrying away the tension, leaving behind a fragile sense of peace. And in that silence, she realized the truth. The encounter with Taza, the water he had given her, the box, the mercenaries, it had all been part of a path she was never meant to walk alone. As Taza stood beside her, shirtless, powerful, and resolute, the night stretching infinitely beyond the cave. Vivienne knew one thing with certainty. Silver Pass would never forget the day an Apache warrior gave water to a woman and then changed the fate of the entire town forever. And the story was far from over. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged peaks surrounding the canyon. Vivienne Hart stood at the mouth of the cave, the carved wooden box still clutched to her chest, now quiet and dormant after the night's chaos. The battle had ended, the mercenaries defeated or scattered, and the echoes of violence had faded like whispers carried away by the desert wind. Taza, shirtless and muscular, his long black hair falling freely over his shoulders, leaned against the jagged rock wall. Tribal beads and feathers glinted in the pale morning light. He was calm, his dark eyes still scanning the horizon, a sentinel even in peace. Vivienne looked at him, awe and gratitude swirling together, and realized that the man who had saved her was more than a warrior. He was a force that had altered the fate of not only her life but the town of Silver Pass itself. "You did it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You saved me. And everyone else." Taza's lips curved slightly in a rare, soft smile. "I did what had to be done. Mercy often carries a price, but it can also shape destiny." Vivienne nodded, eyes drawn to the carved box. She had spent the night poring over the parchment inside, tracing the coded symbols and secret routes that led to her family's hidden vault. With the mercenaries gone, she now held not just treasure, but the power to end the feuds and greed that had haunted Silver Pass for generations. "Now what?" she asked quietly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle in her chest. Taza's gaze softened, though it remained intense. "Now you decide. You hold the key to the town's future. The choice is yours, Vivienne." Her hands tightened around the box, and for a moment, silence hung between them like a fragile thread. Then she spoke, determination threading through her voice. I will end it. No one else should suffer for greed. No one else should die for what's rightfully hidden." Taza nodded approvingly, the morning light glinting off his skin, highlighting the rippling muscles and the tribal jewelry that marked him as more than a man. He was a protector, a living force of the land. "Then we begin," he said. Together they moved down the hidden trail, the box tucked safely under Vivienne's arm. Each step carried a sense of purpose, a quiet power born from the night's trials. The desert around them was silent, save for the wind whistling through the canyon, as if the land itself acknowledged the new chapter about to unfold. When they finally reached the outskirts of Silver Pass, the town seemed unchanged, but Vivienne knew better. She felt the history, the weight of generations, the lingering greed and whispers of betrayal. And yet, with Taza at her side, she felt invincible. Not because of strength, but because of courage, trust, and the mercy that had started everything with a simple offering of water. They made their way to the Hart estate, long abandoned and shrouded in rumors. Vivienne traced the paths marked on the parchment, revealing hidden doors, secret passageways, and finally, the vault. She opened it carefully, revealing treasures amassed over generations, gold, silver, documents, and artifacts all safeguarded from those who would exploit them. But for Vivienne, the greatest treasure was not wealth. It was the chance to right wrongs, to restore balance, and to honor those who had been lost to greed and betrayal. And beside her, Taza watched silently, his presence a reminder that courage and mercy could change the course of lives. Word spread quickly, through Silver Pass. The townspeople, initially shocked by the sudden emergence of the hidden vault, witnessed Vivienne take control of the situation with strength and fairness. She distributed wealth and documents carefully, ending long-standing disputes, and the town slowly breathed a collective sigh of relief. At the edge of the estate, Vivienne turned to Taza. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said softly. He shook his head, the sun catching the beads and feathers in his hair. "You did it because you had to. I only guided you. And sometimes that is all a warrior can do: guide, protect, and stand by when fate chooses someone for a path they cannot walk alone." Vivienne smiled, feeling a profound connection she could not have imagined hours or days ago. "Thank you," she whispered. Taza single quotes S gaze drifted to the horizon. Muscles relaxed now, but his presence still commanding. "The land has its ways," he said, "and today it has chosen mercy over greed." As they stood side by side, the morning sun bathing the desert in gold, Vivienne realized the truth. A single act of kindness, water given to a weary woman, had set in motion a chain of events that changed the course of Silver Pass forever. Lives were saved, secrets unveiled, and justice restored. And in the quiet of the New West, the legacy of mercy lived on, because sometimes the smallest act of compassion can shock a town, alter destinies, and leave an indelible mark on history.